Hi guys, today we are going to do a video talking about a webinar that McLean Hospital had done, and we're going to have some audio with Dr. Matthew Robertson. And this first video we are going to, audio we are going to do is talks about what dissociative identity disorder really is, and basically the severity of it. And I'm reading off a paper because I can't connect things a lot of times. And it talks about the age category as well, on how DID starts. And I want to talk a little bit about that. For me, as far back as my memory can go, is probably about 2.5, maybe 3 years old, and it's just light images and panic and fear images that I had to deal with. Being the severity of my abuse was so packed away with these smaller alters that it took time to process it better. And a backstory on that as well is I doubted myself. I really did. I was like, no, this didn't happen. This didn't happen. And denial's kind of normal when it comes to trauma and abuse. And I remember going to my brother and my mother, and once I started getting memory and images and flashbacks of the abuse, I would go to them and say, I remember this. Did this happen? And it is odd how much they remember and how much their memory comes back as well. And they go, oh yeah, that did happen. We didn't, back then we didn't know what to do about it, or we did the best we could. The fact that my family is open and honest about what had happened, and back then, compared to now, abuse was not easily stopped, and nor was the law involved. My mother didn't even talk about her own abuse till probably, I want to say, when I was in my 30s, because it just was not talked about. And she had gone through a little bit of sexual abuse as well, not as intense as mine. And as a parent, if you don't get the awareness of sexual abuse or physical abuse, and you just kind of, it can't be happening, that's a problem. And that's where you get generations. I can count my family's abuse, sexual abuse and physical abuse, dating back probably 3 generations. And it's still in some parts of my family, it's probably still going on. And that's why I fight so hard to talk about it, work on it, and especially my disorder. But anyway, so I'm going to give you the audio of Dr. Matthew Robertson talking about what DID is, and here's that.
Let's talk a little bit about DID. We mentioned it at the top of the webinar, dissociative identity disorder. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so dissociative identity disorder is, again, it falls in the category of dissociative disorders in the DSM-5. It is a childhood onset reaction to severe childhood abuse, typically occurring during a certain developmental phase for children, usually starting before the age of 6. And it includes a number of symptoms, including depersonalization, which is the sense that a person's body is somehow disconnected from, or different from what it actually is. A person might describe sensing that parts of themselves are missing, or bigger or smaller than they actually are. Sometimes people feel like they're watching themselves from an outside perspective. It includes symptoms of derealization, which are things like sensing the world around you is strange or unfamiliar in some way. It includes amnesia, so loss, memory difficulty, or difficulty remembering kind of daily events, more than would be accounted for by normal forgetting. And then identity confusion and identity alteration. And that's the sense of having one or more distinct personalities or self states within one mind.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. This next audio, he talks about emotional issues, and that the identity issues that come with that, and emotional dysregulation. And basically, this is a very important audio that I really want you to pay attention to. And the reason is because he talks about the honesty and realness of it. And I also want to state that Melissa Kaufman also talks about this issue. DID is a well-hidden disorder. And a lot of people, they don't believe that because of the TikTok trend that's going on and the stigma that's going on with that. And complex PTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is something that usually a person with DID has, and he talks about that in this audio in great detail, okay? And he also talks about the average 8 to 10 years of just getting a diagnosis for this DID. And the reason is because you have to rule out everything else. And it takes a long time to do that. And I explained that in numerous videos prior to this, how the assessment process works. Excuse me. And the thing is, you have to have complex PTSD to have DID usually because of the severity of the trauma. You know, as a kid, if you got your feelings hurt, it's not the same. I'm sorry, it's really not. So, you know, I think the issue is that a lot of these kids and a lot of these TikTokers need to realize what trauma is, because trauma is, for DID, is very severe. And it's not something funny to joke about. Some of us barely lived, you know, so I'm going to let you listen to this audio and pay close attention to it. And I really hope some of the TikTokers hear it as well, because it needs to be stated. And it's not just this doctor talking about this. It's 5, 6, 7 different specialists that have worked 20, 30 years in the field of DID discussing this. So here's that audio.
A viewer would like you to further explain what you mean by patients having difficulty with their identity.
In terms of complex PTSD?
I don't honestly know.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one of the criteria for complex PTSD. People, that sort of symptom is commonly described as questioning who one is, not having a sense of self, not having a firm sense of identity, feeling maybe confused about who one is, how one would like to be. So those sorts of symptoms are often part of complex PTSD.
Let me get us back on DID for a moment here. Signs and symptoms that folks should be watching for, either in themselves or a loved one. What can you tell us about those?
Well, DID is a disorder of hiddenness. So in many cases, people with DID will go unnoticed. And that's really most common. For clinicians, people who are sort of assessing, commonly we will see people with multiple diagnoses over time. Of note, on average, it takes 9 years after a person is first treated for an accurate diagnosis of DID to occur. So people are often carrying diagnoses like bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD. So that's a common, one of the things I would look out for in considering DID. A lot of people with DID don't want to talk about trauma or what's going on in their mind. That they might feel afraid of sharing that. They might feel uncertain about what it means for them. So I think it's hard for family members to look out for things. Certainly, if a person commonly experiences memory difficulty and there isn't an organic or substance use related reason for that, that might be a sign that they have a dissociative disorder, including DID. But again, overt signs are typically not there. People are usually surprised to find out that a person has DID.
Now, in this last audio, Mr. Robertson talks about CPTSD versus PTSD, because I think this is an issue that needs to be understood. There's people out there saying, oh, I got PTSD and DID. No, you usually have to have complex PTSD. And he talks about the definition about the two and the difference between the two. And PTSD is actually very different than CPTSD. And treatment for CPTSD with DID is very complex and a long process compared to PTSD. And that's something that's not talked about a lot. So, and I'm going to give you the definition real quick here on Google, the difference between PTSD and CPTSD. And even my medical bracelet, which I kind of flop because I just don't need you taking my information. There's good people, but there's bad people. And PTSD and CPTSD are very different. And it states here, either complex PTSD or PTSD may occur in a response to trauma, and they have various symptoms in common. So there's a commonality there. CPTSD is caused by ongoing trauma which lasts for months or years, while PTSD may be caused by a single traumatic event. The symptoms of CPTSD are also more complex and may take longer to treat. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you're in a car accident and you don't remember half of the event, and you had a dissociative spell during that accident, and you got to work with it and get through it. That don't take as long. But now if you have CPTSD where you had per se 6-7 car accidents and somebody died and over the year, and you already had a split personality by the time you were 2 or 3 years old, okay? That's going to make it more complex, isn't it? Because you're adding in more trauma as a child. So it intensifies. And the reason that the process takes longer to go through therapy for that is because your alters hold memories of each tiny little event. And for me, that's been a long road because of all the trauma that I've been through. Car accidents, sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, starvation, cult abuse, medications, being misplaced and misdiagnosed, and it's been a rough life. Abortions, all that. And I don't go into great detail on here about that. I am having a documentary done about it, however. But I think that's the huge issue here, is that self-diagnosis is inaccurate, whether you like it or not. Because for one, how do you know if it's PTSD or CPTSD? Just because you Googled it? No. There are specific assessments that need to be done to rule these issues out. And these doctors are trained to do that. You are not. It'd be like saying, oh, I'm a surgeon now. I'm a self-diagnosed surgeon. I can go do open heart surgery. Not without a degree. Not without training, right? Same deal, okay? So anyway, here's the video on complex PTSD and PTSD and the difference. So,
Matt, we sometimes hear the term complex PTSD. What is that getting at? How is that diagnosis different from PTSD?
Yeah. So complex PTSD is not a disorder in the DSM-5. but it is listed as a disorder in the International Classification, or the ICD. And complex PTSD applies to someone who has all the symptoms of PTSD. That's important. So they have to meet criteria for PTSD. But in addition to that, have difficulty with emotion regulation, interpersonal difficulty. It's more common for people who have early childhood trauma to develop a complex PTSD. But the important part that I always like to make clear is that a person still has to have PTSD. It's just PTSD plus these other kind of specific problems that go with it, like the emotion dysregulation, identity, difficulty with understanding one's identity, things like that.
In terms of a loved one's ability to recognize signs and symptoms, are there distinctions between PTSD and complex PTSD that are visible, so to speak?
I think that's a tricky one, because presentations of PTSD in general can look very different. So whether or not someone has complex PTSD versus PTSD is really a question for someone, a professional, who can do a more thorough assessment. It is important to distinguish in some ways, because the treatment course may look a little different. Someone with complex PTSD, we would typically recommend a stage-based approach, where the first stage focuses on a period of stability, safety, and skill development, followed by stage 2, which is more trauma processing. Someone with PTSD that's not complex PTSD might jump right into doing trauma processing work with a shorter or less of a period of work on skills, safety, stabilization.
So I hope you found them audios very useful. You're more than welcome to use them in your therapy or discuss them with your mental health care professional. I guess on a personal note, the reason I work so hard at this and I study so hard at this and I fight with this is because I want to learn more to be healthier. And it also helps you as the viewer to have an idea of how serious DID really is. I was very honored that I got to listen to this webinar, and I will 100% stand behind these doctors, 100%. You know, I got nothing to hide. I got nothing to gain from this other than knowledge, and I am very passionate about mental health disorders, especially DID. I don't study on Tourette's. I don't study on transphobia. I focus on the DID because I know so much about it, and I've spent years and years studying the process. 287 books now I have read on mental health, how to reparent my alters, how to work with my body, and for all of us to work as a team. And now I'm working very hard towards partial awareness and integration, and I fight with it every week, 4 to 6 hours a week. But don't give up. Some people find that I'm blunt and I'm outspoken, and you know what's odd about that? I never used to be this harsh until I met TikTok. But I learned to survive this world and to understand this world, I have to take care of myself and those that are important to me. And to me, people that stand for real mental health are the people I stand behind. And, you know, it is odd because the people I've always connected to are the strong people, the independent people. But now I look at it and I think, what have I learned? And my therapist talked about it. What have you learned? You're either going to sit and cry about it or you're going to do something about it. And I'm doing something about it. And I'm going to continue to do something about it, whether people like it or not. Because this is a serious issue. And it's not just for DID. It's for all people going through this. So, okay. So that's all I have today. I don't want to make this video so long. So, all right. Love you guys. Bye.